Good afternoon. I'm Lisa Szykman. The Center for International Behavioral Finance Research, CIBFR as we like to call it, at William & Mary, is just a center that we have that tests the products from Boston College that Alicia Munnell has spoken about, and Steve Sass as well. And both Alicia and Steve have talked about the disastrous focus group studies that happened at William & Mary when we first tried to test a product. Couching that, we decided that we really want to show you the results and the benefits of what those results came to afterwards. The previous speakers already spoke about the pros and cons of qualitative research. That horse is dead. I'm not going to beat it anymore. Instead, I want to talk about, I am not an economist. I'm not a finance professor, and neither is Nicole. We are marketers. And there's a couple of lessons that I think marketers bring to the table when it comes to the issue of financial literacy in education. One is everybody doesn't think like you. You're not normal. Number one rule, okay? The second rule of thumb is just because you say it doesn't mean people are going to listen, okay? So the things that you need to really understand is what motivates your consumer or your target market, and what will you say that gets them to pay attention, okay? Now, you are exposed to thousands and thousands of messages a day, okay? And the default is that you're going to ignore the message and not process it. Okay, so number one, you want to understand what the motivations are of your target market so that they will pay attention to your message, plain and simple, okay? Now, the second thing is that just because they paid attention to you doesn't mean that they're going to actually listen to you. And for the most part, they're going to either discount what you're saying or they're going to counter-argue what you're saying. So it's really important when you're developing messages like this to understand the motivations and the drivers of your target market. And if you don't understand those things, you could very innocently create a message that's either counter-argued or discounted. And so I am going to actually turn the tables over to Nicole because we have some video clips of the focus groups that we found definitely these things were in existence when they were trying to evaluate Boston College's first attempt at managing your money.
The point is the focus groups weren't a disaster. The
They weren't.
focus
They were
groups
very
were very
helpful.
successful, right?
They were very helpful, yes, even though they were painful at the time.
And hopefully you'll see that through a couple of short tips that we have. So as Lisa said, two of our objectives were, one, to really understand what motivates these people, and two, and more immediately, to test some of these products and how effective they were with this particular demographic. So that being said, the demographics that we looked at were people between the ages of 58 and 71, and these were people that were very near retirement or had just retired. And the people that had just retired, the majority of them were actually back to work already in at least a part-time capacity. So they'd retired from their main careers. Okay. So in trying to understand the motivations and perceptions of retirement amongst this demographic, one of the key insights that we noticed with this group is that they really felt as though they were a generation caught in the middle. So we like to affectionately refer to this group as the sandwich generation. So these are people that felt that their path to financing retirement was much less clearly defined than that of their parents, who they saw use mostly defined benefit plans, and their children, who they saw very clearly following the path using defined contribution plans.
Are you just, financial planner? Who knew anything about a financial planner? Nobody. There wasn't one. Because I've had my son come, Mom, how come you didn't go to a financial planner when you were in your 30s? I said, my parents didn't have it. It wasn't done. It just didn't happen. So they were really shocked,
I agree. We should be been thinking about this when we were younger, but we didn't. Maybe my son has already. I mean, he's 25 years old, and he's talking to a financial planner.
One of the other major things that we noticed in talking to this group is that they really expressed a fear of retirement.
And when I look at the savings rate, I panic, and I've lived cautiously. I've tried to save, but life is expensive, and I think that's scary because our parents lived, like your parents, they lived a modest lifestyle. They really saved a lot, and my generation hasn't been able to do that. So I worry about myself, and I worry about other people I know and the things like.
It's scary just inherently because it has to do with an uncertain future. Abilities, but, you know, health is a wild card, and finances are a wild card, and your ability to control those things diminishes as you get older. So uncertainty is anxiety producing.
Okay, so our second objective, as I mentioned before, was really testing the effectiveness of the brochure Managing Your Money in Retirement, which many of you heard Steve Sass talk about earlier, to see if it resonated with this target market. And what you'll notice, what you would have noticed if you had looked at the initial version of this particular brochure, is that there was a large discussion of annuities in the brochure. And what we noticed in talking to this group is that they seem to be very skeptical of annuities. And this goes back to Lisa's point of understanding motivations and how understanding people's motivations can actually affect, or can actually help you define, better tailor some of these communications. So as a result of this skepticism, what we found is that they really started to question how credible the source of this brochure was.
The thing is that you're using like the annuity or something like that, the less you understand it and the less likely you are to be very trustful of what's going on with it.
What's the last page and see a list of companies selling annuities? I'm serious, I was expecting to flip the last page and say, so here's where you go and buy your annuities.
Okay.
With that skepticism of annuities, we also saw a skepticism of financial advisors.
Guys, many of these financial guys, the insurance companies, I think they're all crooks. You know, you look at all the big financiers and the financial people in New York and stuff like that, they're not in it for your benefit, they're in it for their benefit.
So as a result of understanding this information, what we saw is that, you know, the information wasn't resonating with people. They weren't paying attention to it. As Lisa was saying before, they were discounting the information. And so the brochure didn't do well, to say the least. So the brochure was revised, and actually, when you checked in, you got a copy of this brochure, and it has tested phenomenally as a result of paying attention to some of these things that the people in this target demographic had to say. More specifically, some of the things that they did to revise this brochure was to more clearly identify the source of information, that it was an academic institution, and to tone down the discussion of annuities, which we saw people were incredibly skeptical of. And so you can see some of the comments that people had in response to the new brochure. The information really seemed to resonate with them. They were paying more attention. They seemed to interpret it in the way that it was intended. So a couple of the comments that came out of this: the information seemed to be very credible, and it made you think about your own situation as you enter retirement. The information was presented by an academic institution and not a biased financial institution, brokerage firm, or life insurance company. It seemed to match what my situation is and what my experience has been. These examples seemed relevant to me. So the brochure has done fantastic, and thanks to really talking to some of these people in the target demographic and having a better understanding of what motivates them.
Thank you.